Any questions before we begin about anything that's occurred in the shul or the calendar or anything like that? So we'll continue with our handy textbook that we've been using, going through the Melachot Shabbat. So how far we got last time. We completed all of the melachot, all of the labors that lead up to bread, right? The melachot that provide for food. The next series of melachot are about clothing. I believe we started but didn't finish those. Does that sound, what you remember?
We definitely started clothing.
You started clothing. Do you have, what melachot do you have a reference to in your, do you have any particular one that we?
I have like through trapping.
Trapping, okay, great.
And erasing.
Oh, so we did much farther than I thought. Okay, we did all of the, we did the weaving ones, we did all the looms and fine, great, okay. Trapping and erasing, oh that's actually beyond. So we did the clothing ones, then we went on to the ones leading to writing. Okay, erasing, good. Erasing is, are we all the leather preparation ones, those two?
Yeah.
Fine, so erasing.
And we talked about like the soap.
Oh, amazing, amazing, okay. Great, so we're, okay, good, so we're moving far. Okay, erasing is only malach if it's done for the purpose of writing. Okay, so if you erased, like, all malachot, all of these labors are only biblical violations, only fully problematic if they're done in a productive manner. If they're in a destructive manner, it's not a biblical violation of the malacha. We don't do it anyway, but it's not a pure violation. So erasing, that's destructive. Erasing isn't creative, it's destructive. Our definition of malacha was a creative act, something that enhances civilization. So you can erase for the purpose of writing. That's the definition. That's the actual pure Torah level dictionary textbook example of erasing that would violate Shabbat on a biblical level. It's erasing for the purpose of writing. When would you erase for the purpose of writing? Because you need to write in that spot, right? Okay. You write the wrong thing, you have to erase, and you want to write something else over that, okay? You clear a surface to write on top of it. So what about, I should have another example. What about, sometimes you have, these are some examples of things that some people are strict about. Looks like, some people are strict about, but there are some people are lenient about. There's different opinions. So sometimes you have library books where you have like this. There's a stamp on the spine, or no, not the spine. The spine. No, what do you call this? This is the spine. It's not the spine. This is the spine. The face, whatever. Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, we talked about this.
Yeah,
one.
we did.
If you open it, does that erase the lines?
And we said, some people say yes, some people are strict about it. I think it's unnecessary to be strict.
Because it's still there.
It's still there. It's not.
What is
Can you imagine? I have to find a book like this. I don't know if we see.
You open it for what?
See, because we're in fact sure, so we don't have books like this.
If there's like a stamp on the edges,
I've
and then
seen
when you
like
open it, you're like,
Oh.
like there's ink on the edge. Only,
It
but then if you
says
open
property
it,
of
it's like,
Chicago Public Library or something.
Oh,
You can't scan it.
yeah.
So when you open the book,
Dictionaries.
okay, when you open the book, it doesn't say that anymore. And so maybe opening it, I'm erasing, and then you close it and write it.
That defeats
Okay.
the purpose of the fact that it's a book.
Oh, okay. So maybe say right. So maybe you would say it's meant to operate that way. You're not making a permanent change. You're just.
So like the door where
It's like opening and closing a door, not building a wall. You're you're opening a folding chair. It's not building a chair. It's sort of the way the book operates as it opens and closes. But there are those restrictions. You should know, like there are people who just out there in the world. You may spend Shabbat with somebody who would not. You'll also go to Orthodox shuls where all the Sidurim are stamped this way. So you do have different opinions. The other people, what about tearing open wrappers of food containers, packages, little candy wrappers with writing on it. So you tear the writing, you're erasing. It's similar to erasing, right? It says a word. You tear the M&M's bag open, now it doesn't say anything anymore. So there again, there's restricted about that as well. and even cutting a cake which has writing on it, right? So now you eat the cake. It doesn't. You used to say something, you take out a piece, doesn't say anything anymore. You cut it, take a piece away, doesn't say anything anymore. So there are those who are strict about that as well. And the grounds for leniency, there are even additional grounds of leniency with the cake. It's the way you're not doing an active erasure, you're eating. And this is like derech achila, it's the normal manner of eating something. Like that's what you do. You consume it, and information is lost in that eating process. And it's not your intention to do it that way. It's not for the purpose of writing. There are many, many grounds for leniency, but we do have like some significant halachic authorities who are saying don't cut cakes that have writing on Shabbat. Everyone agrees it's permissible to eat cookies or pastries that have lettering like carved or imprints or stamped. Like sometimes you have like biscuits that say whatever, powdered milk biscuits or whatever, they're like stamped in. So there, it's not writing on top of the cookie, it's just the cookie itself is stamped in such a way when it's baked, I guess, in a mold, and so you have lettering. That, everyone agrees is fine. It's just frosting, okay? On top would be a problem. I'd say probably writing with a frosting pen on Shabbat would be a problem. That would be, even if it's not permanent, it could be kind of permanent. If you leave the cake for a few days, it'll stay for a few days. So cutting the cake also, okay? So the thing to be careful about though is not to be so strict about not tearing letters that you end up being lenient about something else. And I think that this is often a problem, there's no way to be strict about one thing without being lenient in something else. And here an example would be, you're very careful to open your yogurt container in such a way, that your candy bar in such a way that you don't tear any letters, but in so doing you're so meticulous in opening up the wrapper that now you've created an opening, which is a problem, right? You can't get to food you're allowed to get to food by destroying the wrapping, the packaging that's surrounding the food. You can't, though, do so in a particularly meticulous way that creates an opening. That now you've asiyat petach, you've made like a little tool. Now you have this little canister for holding M&Ms with a neat little hole because you tore the bag open so meticulously. So I think it's better in many cases just to open the thing in a destructive way, so you're not making an opening in this packaging and then eat the contents without being as strict about the lettering, because the lettering, again, it's not for the sake of writing, it's not with your intention, it's done with derech achila and the manner of what one eats for the purpose of extracting food, not for the purpose of erasing, and not for the purpose of writing. Yes?
Would an example then be to stuff trash into that bag and use that, you said like as a tool? Would that
Be worse, you're saying? If you, no, I mean, I
like,
think,
is that like
no, because that wouldn't even necessary. Meaning, even if you, let's say it's if you tear open your M&M bag, then you've already torn open the packaging that's preventing you from eating your M&Ms, and then you can eat your M&Ms. But if you meticulously open it, now you have a tool. What's your tool? You have an M&M canister, which you can neatly pour your M&Ms out of a beautiful little circle on top. You don't have to actually use it for something else. The point is, you've made what had been this bag that you can't do anything with it other than just tear it open. Is now something with a mouth. Okay? You've made a mouth to this container.
So then could you not open a milk carton?
Because you're making, so you can. I'm trying to remember why. I think the reason why, because I think I remember reading about this a long time ago. I believe the reason why you can open a milk, meaning a carton where you do that thing and you that, which I don't have this English anymore. But I think the lenient position would be that. Well, actually, that's a good question, actually. You would say it's already that it's sort of designed for that sort of the potential is really there. You're just you're not actually making the opening. It's already there as a pouring device, and you're just uncovering the impediment to it being a pouring device by unfolding it.
It's like, what if it's a bag that's resealable? So it's the same idea, like the chip bags that have the built-in Ziploc. You tear it open along the top, but there's still like.
So now, yeah. So that would be. I think it would probably be better not to kind of tear it open and just empty it and destroy
like
the
pour it
bag.
into a bowl and not use the bag. Right?
Certainly with cans. I think we talked about this with metal cans. We talked about this maybe we'll get there. You know why? Because it comes up later. It's actually the very next very next page. So let's hold off on that for a second.
Okay.
Anything else about writing and erasing? Embroidering counts as writing. Writing in sand is, even though it's temporary, so it's rabbinic, so that counts as, if we're erasing in sand, okay, it's rabbinic because it's not permanent. Writing in mist, like in the bathroom mirror, it's rabbinic because it's not permanent. But drawing, painting, etc. would all be a problem. Rabbinically, we're not allowed to do business on Shabbat, lest it lead to writing. There's some restrictions on reading certain types of materials on Shabbat, documents, lest you amend them and write on them. So should read Torah on Shabbat, maybe like a ennobling novel or something, but not like catalogs, okay, or contracts that you're gonna be tempted to make notes on, called Shtari Hedyotin. I've just got I guess all of you are too young, I think. Do any of you know what freaky freezies are? Do you have them when you were young? They're gloves, when you took okay. In the 80s, there were these gloves that you took out into the cold, and they, designs would, form on the glove. Some sort of chemical process, the temperature drops below 40 degrees, the design emerges on the glove. And it warms up, the design goes away. So these are very popular in the 80s, and so apparently you can buy them still. So that's a question, whether that causing that. Okay, we had this discussion whether or not that was could you wear them on Shabbat in the cold? I think probably yes, but again, it's okay. All right. So next is Bona. Bona and Soter. Bona is building. Soter is demolishing. So again, Soter, demolishing. It's destructive. It's definitionally destructive, but it's destructive for the purpose of building. So what's destruction for the purpose of building? Would be an example.
Tearing one house down to build another on top of it.
Exactly. You buy, very certain suburbs they do that. They're into that. People buy homes, they tear them down, they build bigger homes, right? That's soter almanat. Right? You're destroying for the purpose of building. Right? You're removing boards, from a building to replace them with something else. Okay, that's demolishing. Which is a building, building a house, repairing a wall. What else? What else? So other examples of this would be a building, installing a window as well, right? Meaning anything attached, right? Securing a hook with a nail as well, okay? Onto the wall, right? It's connected to the ground, okay? It's connected to real estate, okay? Also, rabbinically, the Talmud actually says you can't do elaborate hair braids on Shabbat because that's considered from a building, which is interesting if that's how it's understood.
You say elaborate?
Yeah, so I don't exactly know.
Because I've heard you can't undo a braid also?
That would probably be for the issues of untying. I mean, there are issues of knots. There's, I know very little about women's hair. You have long hair. You should look into this carefully, and I can help you do that.
I've also read that it's modest to keep your hair braided if you have long hair and are unmarried.
There are definitely opinions that believe that. But there are also opinions that braiding on Shabbat is, the Talmud discusses it. So I don't know what that meant, why it was called building. Maybe they had I don't know.
Picturing Marie Antoinette with the tie.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, so I don't know if that's quite what they had in mind, but so therefore I'd say any of you with long hair behooves you to look into this. Not that we do that. I'm sorry, I just don't know enough about hair.
That's okay.
Opening an umbrella on Shabbat is also. When umbrellas were invented, there was actually a dispute amongst the rabbinic scholars about whether or not it was forbidden or permissible to open an umbrella on Shabbat. There are compelling arguments in both directions, but the day was won by the strict opinion that says that an umbrella cannot be used on Shabbat, can't be opened on Shabbat. Assuming that you can't carry an umbrella without an Eruv, but even if there is an Eruv where you can carry, you can't open an umbrella. And why can't you open the umbrella before Shabbat and carry it open? So that might be fine, but everyone will think that you opened it on Shabbat, so it looks bad. Okay, so we don't use umbrellas on Shabbat. Makes sense. Because it's like erecting a tent. Okay.
Yeah, it's like erecting it, but you said about but opening before. Yeah. That's the only reason? Is there a sonic reason? The
That's
tent?
what I can think of.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
You know, it's not really a linear position art. It's not really a tent. It's a tent. It's portable. You carry it. It tends to stay on the ground. It's more like opening and closing a door rather than right. That would be leading opinions. But the really South observant Jews with very rare exceptions don't use umbrellas.
Oh yeah, there's lots of ways of going around
Correct.
that.
Yeah, the truth is that Talmud discusses hats with wide brims as being problematic also for similar reasons. But that, I don't know, people seem to do, but we'll go figure. It's permissible to open and close a folding table, a folding chair. That's not building because that's how it's meant to operate. And therefore it's also understood permissible to open like a carriage, baby stroller, a stroller canopy. How's it different from an umbrella? I don't really know. I can't tell you. They seem very similar to me. I guess a carriage hood or the stroller. I think it's more, even when it's closed, it's usually more open than an umbrella. I'll put it that way, right? And so, if you have something which is like a ceiling, which is like a retractable roof, and it is partially open, you can open it more and shut up, right? So that would be. Okay. So I'd imagine I think the stroller situation is more akin to something which is partially open, but the umbrella is really entirely compact before you open it. Three more. Okay. Anything else that falls under this? Can cover a large barrel, right? Because that's erecting a tent, right? So building certain things out of Legos, if you like a really big couch fort, could be a problem. In theory, if it's really big, it might be a problem on Shabbat. Or giant Lego structure. Okay, but I mean, it has to be pretty big. I forget it's in order for that to be a problem with building. Okay. And the reason why the Talmud says you can't go swimming on Shabbat is because you may, in like I'd say in the rivers, you may build a flotation device, which would entail all sorts of malacha. Okay. Next two, Mavir and Mechabe. Sorry, Havara and Kibui. Okay, lighting a fire and extinguishing a fire. So lighting a fire, that we sort of seem to understand. You can't light a fire, nor can you add fuel to a already going fire, right? You can't add more oil to your lamp on Shabbat, if you have an oil lamp or something. What else? Turning on an incandescent light bulb is understood to be a form of lighting a fire. Turning on an LED or a fluorescent light bulb is generally understood not to be a form of fire.
What about electricity, which is fire?
So electricity is not fire, right? Electricity is a flow of electrons through a wire, through a conductive material. It's not actually fire. And I'll say more about electricity in just a moment, okay? That's a good point. But let's say an incandescent light bulb, it's a filament that's heated until it glows, which is pretty much, that's understood to be close enough to fire to count. An LED bulb is just gas that gets excited, there's nothing burning, there's no filament. An LED bulb also, it's like electrons jumping around, there's no filament, nothing burning. So those are not considered to be fire. Answer your question?
No, what would be like an example, I'm trying to think of an example of one. I feel like, do people use them often in the home?
LEDs?
Yeah.
We have switched
All
our
of
entire
ours
home
are.
to LEDs.
Oh.
They make like regular.
They now make LED. First of all, LED lights are all the lights that you're going to have any like small electronic device. So if you have issues of like, you open this door and this little sensor goes, those are all LEDs, which lowers dramatically the threshold of like Shabbat sensitivity. Those are those little, your burglar alarm thing, motion sensor, this, that, anything blinking, whatever. Those are all LEDs and.
Anything on the tablet?
I'm not sure how those operate.
Like if you move your phone, let's say, and the light comes on, is that LED then?
I don't know.
Oh.
Probably, but I don't know. It's almost certainly not a light bulb, right? We can never have a light bulb that small. That would be too hot for a phone. There's no light bulb. There's no incandescent light bulb in a phone.
So basically, anything that's not a light bulb with like a glowing filament is fine.
I didn't say it's fine.
Well, but it's not this
correct.
category.
Correct. Listen,
Under this.
10 years ago, not 10, 5 years ago, almost every light bulb in your home was an incandescent light bulb.
Yeah.
They've been, I think they're illegal. I mean, they're almost illegal now, right? Their efficiency regulations make them almost illegal, and in most homes they've been replaced with either CF compact fluorescent bulbs or with LED bulbs. So it's, I think we have, I'm trying to think if we have any left in this.
No, it's illegal, but specific was, but yeah.
Right, it's possible. It is possible, I think, to actually have them, but many people have replaced them in their home because they are, in fact, the LED bulbs use a fraction of electricity and they last much longer.
But you still can't turn on and off, right?
Right? You have to figure out why. It's not, whatever it is, it's not, because turning it on is not, it's not havara, it's not burning, you're not burning anything. It's not fire.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to figure out why what's so problematic about it. Okay?
Uh-huh.
We will,
Okay.
okay? But we have to figure out why. Okay, like this, I think this is a, these are incandescent bulbs.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Okay.
So there's a filament inside, it's a piece of metal, it gets really hot and it glows. Okay, so turning this on Shabbat would be a biblical violation. These are fluorescent, these are filament. Those are LEDs, I think. Maybe not those, the ones in the big shot.
Yeah.
Extinguishing also seems like a destructive action. So why is extinguishing a problem?
Charcoal.
Good. Because I said that, or because we...
I think we mentioned it like
We
a
did.
long
We
time
did.
ago,
Very
just in
good.
passing.
Excellent. So extinguishing is a problem. The Mishnah, and it's in the Mishnah that we recite Friday night between Kabbalat Shabbat and Marav. We read a chapter of Mishnah, which inter alia mentions if you extinguish the lamp for this reason, that reason, this reason, you're putter. You haven't violated Shabbat on this like biblical threshold. But if you do it to make pecham, to make charcoal, to make a wick that can like quickly catch, when you extinguish, you blow out a candle, you're actually making something. What have you made? You've made a fast lighting candle. You've made a candle that can be ignited very quickly. And so so making the charcoal is the actual, so if you're not making charcoal and you extinguish a fire, you haven't violated on a biblical level. So you extinguish a gas flame on your stove, that's not a biblical violation because there's no wick, there's no charcoal, right? So, and if you turn off an electric light bulb, it's also not a biblical violation because there's even an incandescent bulb, you turn it off. Turning it on might be a biblical violation, turning it off makes sense because you're not making anything. Driving a car is burning, right? That's okay. Although an electric car might be different.
It's still fire in some of them. Because they have a recharge, they have a
Like a hybrid, yeah.
dynamo.
Oh, right, exactly. Oh, I see. I mean, even a fully electric car, when you push the brakes and it recharges it, that generates.
Also from AC to DC, the conversion is, well, it's kind of electricity, which...
We'll talk about electricity. It's definitely electricity, we'll talk about that, okay. Finally, the last melacha is called mak. This is sort of like a catch-all one. It's called maka b'patish, the final hammer blow. And this is sort of, it's completing an object by putting on the finishing touches. So like you make something, you go, you kind of test it with a hammer, now it's done, okay? So that is forbidden on Shabbat. So that can cover an awful lot of things. So for example, maybe what about, here we get a new fancy jacket, when you buy it, the pockets are sewn closed, so maybe kind of tearing open those stitches on the pockets, that could be a violation of because now you have pockets, right? You by just tearing open that stitching. Lacing shoes could be makbid patish, right? Because you're lacing them up. The shoes have no laces. String them up, now it's usable, okay? Tuning an instrument, replacing a guitar string. Certainly our tuning probably also initially, right? You're doing the final adjustments that make it usable. Setting up a sound system. Okay, well, electricity we'll talk about in a minute, but whatever electricity is, if you take your microphone, you plug it into the amp, you adjust the volume, you plug in the cord to the power, like that's not patch, I think, because I would say, because you're setting up this system and now it's usable as an amplification system. So there's a rabbinic prohibition against playing instruments on Shabbat lest you break them and repair them. And that's really, because if you repair them, that's not patish. That's a biblical violation of the final hammer blow, of turning something useless into something useful. Okay, so now that we have the melacha, one more. There's one more, I'm sorry. Carrying something from one domain to another domain, or more than 4 cubits in a public domain. Okay? So 3 domains on Shabbat. There's a private domain. Private domain is, like someone's home, basically, with, or some enclosed space. There's a public domain, which is like a broad public thoroughfare. There's also an in-between space, like an alleyway, or a courtyard. That's an in-between space. So biblically, the prohibition is from private to public, or from public to private, or more than 4 cubits in the public domain. Rabbinically, you can't carry in the Carmelit, in that middle area, in the alleyway, in that middle ground, nor from the private to middle, from middle to public, from public to middle, right? None of those, rabbinically, none of those carryings are possible. So yeah, it's not strange. Enjoy. How are you? Is that headed somewhere?
No, we just had to do a,
Awesome.
yeah.
Good candles.
Yeah.
Have a bonfire?
No, it was an induction kind of thing.
Awesome. You guys that introduced?
Yeah, we're new board members, so yeah.
So you can
Okay.
Hey guys. No, congratulations to the rescue. Good. Right, BBYO was meeting next door, and they had a candlelight ceremony, where they were inducting new members, new board members. So, okay. So teenagers, that's the answer to the. So okay, fine. So carrying keys, babies, what else? Pushing a cart. This all would be a problem in a public domain more than 4 cubits, more than 6 feet, or to that transition. Let's hold off on bracket carrying, because there's a little bit more to be said about carrying. And I want to go back to the electricity question, because now you've seen all the melachot now, all 39 we've discussed. So where does electricity fit in?
Creating, I guess.
Creating. Yeah, like what? Like
I will say fire, but you
I would say
said
fire. So when electricity was invented, people started to figure out what's going on and can this be used on Shabbat or not? Everyone said you can't use it, but they came up with lots of different reasons why not. So some thought maybe it's fire going through the wires. That's not really what it is though. It isn't fire. It's just not, right? It's so what else might it be? Other suggestions were the Makabapatish kind of example, like the final hammer blow, that when you complete an electric circuit, you've now completed a device. So I have this like lump of components, wires, and stuff, and I flip a switch, and now it's radio. So that flipping the switch, that's Makabapatish. I've completed this tool. This device wasn't finished by building the circuit. By closing the circuit, I've completed this device, and now it's operating, and it's complete.
But what if you dim it up? If it was always, let's say, on low and you dim it up?
So what if it's always operating just like too low, you can't hear? Good question. Very good question. That might be different. And B, maybe it's more akin to opening and closing a folding chair.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say, because it was functional, it was just off, and that's like how it's supposed to be used, so it's like a door or a folding chair.
Good. So the Chazon Ish, a very important rabbi in the mid-20th century, felt any completion of an electric circuit is a biblical violation because of Makar Pachish. You're completing a circuit, that's building. Shlomo Auerbach, who was a bit younger, died in 1995. He felt, no, it's like you closing a door is not building a wall. Like opening and closing a circuit is like opening and closing a door. It's meant to open and close, and it's not, you're not building anything, that's just how it operates. So he maintained that other than, if the electronic device itself is doing something forbidden on Shabbat, so that's obviously forbidden. So like a lawnmower, electric lawnmower is violating Shabbat when it cuts grass. Like that is kotzer, right? That is one of the melechot. An incandescent light bulb, that's a fire in that glass vacuum. But there's no biblical violation of Shabbat per se, merely in the operation of an electronic device. So if so, what is it? What's wrong? What's so bad about it? So you can say there's a universal practice not to use electronic devices on Shabbat, and that practice, sort of that universal custom, that practice has its own obligatory force. This is a universal practice thousands of Jews from the invention of electricity until today not to use electronic devices. I think that's true. I think that's compelling, but it means that you can differentiate between different types of electronic devices and not drive yourself crazy. And when you have extenuating circumstances or emergency situations, and you have to kind of prioritize, you have to just then you know that okay, an incandescent light bulb, that's a biblical violation, but a phone call to my hosts to say, who are expecting me to arrive at their house for Shabbat, to say my bus got a flat tire, I'm okay, but I'll be so don't send a search party because right. It happened in Israel some years ago, right? Somebody was late for Shabbat, they didn't call, and they called in the army, they called the whole search, and the person was fine. They got delayed, they realized they weren't going to reach their destination for Shabbat, and it was too late for them to call, they didn't call. So no, make that phone, the phone call there's no inherent violation of Shabbat in the phone call. To let somebody know that, if the expense of not making the phone call is somebody's going to be worried that you've been kidnapped, you can make that phone call. I would say also, maybe even for, someone who's, you're allowed to violate Shabbat for somebody who's, for somebody whose life is in danger, even somebody whose life isn't in danger, but maybe the phone call just check in with them, right? That would be, that would be, that could be a reasonable, choice one could make in a certain circumstance, right? So again, just to be aware that there's a universal practice not to use electricity that we should take it very seriously, but when we're trying to prioritize and sort of triage, and preserve Shabbat under really challenging circumstances, just be aware where certain things fit in. And a phone call per se, a text per se, is not probably a biblical violation of anything. Nor is it a rabbinic violation, because rabbinic violations were only legislated by the rabbis in the Talmudic period, and they didn't have electricity, so they can't, okay? Another way to understand electricity, though, it's a little more sort of grounds for taking it seriously, and not using it seriously. I think we mentioned, maybe we didn't mention, we mentioned the category called muktzeh, is that something we talked about? Maybe not. So, muktzeh is a category, new category, new term. Muktzeh is, we didn't talk about this yet, okay. Muktzeh is a category of object that don't have Shabbat uses and really they're used for, their primary use is something forbidden, they're, or they are like a saw that you use for cutting, or a pen used for writing, candlesticks, right, which you burn, lulav etcher that you're not going to use on Shabbat, you set it aside. The things that are not used on Shabbat and they can't be used on Shabbat, or you don't want to use them on Shabbat, or they have no use at all because they're just like a stick or a stone. So these things can't be moved on Shabbat. You can't throw rocks on Shabbat, right? Even inside an area, you can't move pens and pencils around. You carry them around. You can't carry change in your pocket, right? Things that aren't Shabbat appropriate for these reasons can't be moved on Shabbat. Unless you need the space, you are allowed to move them if you need the if you need the spot, like it happens to be like your pencil is on top of the chair you want to sit down, you can move it out of the way, but you can't just carry it around. Okay? Rambam writes the reason why these muktzah restrictions were added by the rabbis is because they realized that Jews had transitioned from being farmers to being city dwellers, and most of the melachot are agrarian, agricultural. And if you live in the city, like when was the last time you plowed, right? Probably been many, many weeks since you plowed. And so Shabbat is no different than the weekday. Right? If you aren't a farmer, you're not living an agrarian lifestyle anymore, Shabbat is too similar to weekdays. And so Maimonides, Rambam writes that the rabbis decided to enact these additional restrictions on Shabbat to make sure the day would be sufficiently different from the weekdays. And that's why they made these restrictions. I think electricity for us is very similar, right? Not using our computers and our phones, our devices on Shabbat, like that, sets the day apart more than most of the melachot that we rarely do during the week either. So your lights are set, right? Shabbat's about living in the world as God created it and as you've shaped it, rather than one day a week, rather than the rest of the week, 6 days a week, you shape the world and you improve it and you improve yourself and you do it right. And Shabbat, you inhabit the world that you made in partnership with God. So you have your partner ready, your home is ready, the lights are where you want them, maybe a timer for this one's on, that one's off, and then you just inhabit that space that you've made. So I think not flipping switches, disconnect, unplugging from media, is so important. I think to having the day be different, and I think that's it can be also it's probably one of the most important things. Even though again, it's not a biblical violation of one of the 39 categories of labor, but it's compared to I don't know, like setting up a loom, but it's really really essential to given how we spend our time, what we do during the week, really essential to the day being experienced as different. Ramban, Nachmanides, even goes so far as to say that there's a biblical obligation to make Shabbat a restful, tranquil day that is above and beyond the particulars of the 39 melachot. Because you could schlep furniture around your house and all day long, back and forth, and you haven't violated any of the 39 melachot because you're not carrying it outside, you're just carrying it inside. But that's not a restful day. The day should be tranquil, the day should be peaceful, the day should be different. And he says this category, Utin Dechol, weekday activities, violates the biblical commandment that Shabbat should be a restful, peaceful, tranquil day. Again, so I think also just the unplugging, the not using devices and media, disconnecting from media is a really big piece of all that. Questions, comments on that? Yeah.
One thing when you say about closing a circuit,
Mm-hmm.
let's say the fluorescent,
Yeah.
that's also not okay.
So for Chazon Ish, it would be no different. Whatever kind of light bulb you use, you flip a switch and turn it on, that's a biblical violation. According to Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, that's just not a thing. That's not a biblical violation to turn on a
But I'm
fluorescent.
talking about turning off.
Turning off would be, so it would be, what would turning off be? Turning off would be a problem because of, maybe it's the soter you're destroying, right? If turning on is binyan, is building, then turning off is soter. It's you're disassembling, and for a productive reason, because you're saving electricity, you're saving fuel for the purpose of using it again, right? So that would be. So Chazon Ish was very strict to electricity, and to the point of accordingly, reportedly he wouldn't speak to people who had hearing aids on Shabbat. Speak to people who use hearing aids on
But
Shabbat.
it's not because nefesh in some way?
No, you would say, I don't think so. We have it's a real biblical violation. No, because you could stay home and somebody could take care of you, right? You don't have to,
Interesting.
right? You don't have to leave the house, right? But Jews do use hearing aids on Shabbat, and it's understood to be fine because really we don't, unlike the Chazon Ish, we understand it to be, I wish I knew better guidelines for hearing. I don't know if you have to turn on before Shabbat or if that's advised, that even works for all of them, how you can adjust it, but it's understood to be, it's just done, one way or the other. I really should learn more of the practical guidelines. It's interesting, again, we don't use microphones, we use hearing aids. And they're really the same thing. So what's the difference between a microphone and a hearing aid? So you could say, it's like, to be cynical, you could say it was politics. In the 1950s, this emerged as one of the defining points of an Orthodox synagogue as opposed to the conservative synagogue. We didn't use microphones, and the story is, the joke, whatever, from the 50s was that those who forbade didn't know enough about electrical engineering to understand how a microphone works, and those who permitted didn't know enough about halacha to understand like Hilchot Shabbat sufficiently. That's a cruel caricature, and but in any event, this emerged as a very important kind of polemical, like political issue in the 50s, defining characteristics of Orthodox shuls. We didn't have microphones, but 20 years later, everyone got hearing aids, and they're essentially the same thing. You could say again, not using microphones preserves the intimate nature of our synagogue life, that we kind of have to. We have smaller congregations, where we have to kind of huddle around to hear what's going on. There's a little obligation on the people to speak a little bit louder for what we heard, and we sort of preserve that intimacy, and maybe that's why. Whereas the hearing aid is to enable somebody who would otherwise have a very isolating experience on Shabbat to participate, be part of the community, to interact with others, which maybe it's not pikuach nefesh, it might not be life-saving, but it's certainly life-enhancing, and a kavod habriyot. It's affirming of human dignity, which is.
There is some, I know, pikuach nefesh issues about that, especially for elders that, they need to hear to know where they are.
It could be. You can imagine a situation like that. But they can also stay home, right? They can stay home and read books all day. Right? They don't have to leave the house. But but people want to leave the house. People have a right to leave the house. You want to hear traffic. I understand that. They do make Shabbat compliant microphone systems for synagogues that are different in a number of ways. One difference is that they have microphones that are more similar to cell phone microphones, from what I understand, where the current is constantly flowing and the voice is just shaping the current, whereas a more conventional microphone, your voice, like a non-digital, like I guess an analog microphone, your voice is moving a thin, piece of fabric, some sort of membrane, which is in an electric field, and that creates a current. So a standard microphone, it's like a generator. You're causing motion inside a magnetic field, which creates a current. And you're generating a current through speaking into a conventional microphone, whereas in a digital microphone, the current's there and you're just shaping it with your voice. That's what I understand. I'm not sure that's
It's just always on, just a frequency change.
something like that. Something like that.
And that's okay.
That's better, right? That would be okay. Yes, exactly. And although again, I think you could also make an argument that even the standard microphone, which is what I think most hearing aids have, would also be fine. The issue would be you want to make sure that all of the components. So that's one element which they change. The other element, which I think is more crucial, is that all of the switches and connectors are sealed and locked, because the plugging in and the adjusting and the amplifier and that's I think a biblical violation. So it's the device, the system is designed in a way so that everything has to be done before Shabbat, and you lock it, and only a Shomer Shabbos Jew has the key the whole time, right? You can't adjust it. But then you have a third problem. What if you need to adjust it? Like, what if there's a feedback loop, right? Which sometimes happens with microphones, right? Where it goes like, right? That really happy. So there's a Shabbat compliant shut-off switch. How does that work? It works through means of a concept which we haven't talked about yet, but there's a good time as any to introduce, called grama. Grama means indirect causation. Indirect causation is permissible on Shabbat to avoid a loss. So, for example, if your house is on fire and no one's life is in danger because you live in a desert island, okay, you cannot extinguish the fire, and you can't even rescue your possessions from the fire, lest you be tempted to extinguish the fire. What you can do, however, is take earthenware jugs and place them in a circle around the fire, so that as the fire expands, it cracks the earthenware jugs, and then the water comes out and destroys the fire. That's called grubba. That's indirect causation. Indirect causation is not a biblical violation of Shabbat, and you can do it to avoid major loss, like the case with extinguishing the fire. So you have something called a grumma switch. It's an electric switch that works with grumma. How does it work with grumma? It's a computer chip in this switch, and the computer switch sends a signal every random number of milliseconds that says, should we keep the system on or off? Should we keep the system on or off? And then the switch either tells it yes or no. So You turn off the switch, you haven't done anything. But the next time the
I'll ask you.
the microchip says, should we keep the system on or off? It'll say, yeah, turn it off now. Then it'll turn it off. So you've indirectly caused the switch to go off. There's a company now that believes that you can have grandma switches in your home
Yeah,
and use it for turning on off lights, as you wish over the course of Shabbat. This is the subject of a tremendous halachic controversy. But more compelling would be to use a switch of this sort as an emergency shut-off for a synagogue, microphone system. So I know this about microphone because I worked at a synagogue that had one of these systems. It was a very expensive system to install, and this was one of the features it had. And I worked there for a summer, and one Shabbat, we had to do the emergency shut-off. So we did. And the system, the people who certified this, it's an organization called SOMET, sort of a laboratory, technology laboratory in Israel. They do like the metal detectors at the Kotel. There are all sorts of and all sorts of devices for hospitals that enable doctors to do various things in the most Shabbat compliant way possible. So they make these switches and
That's interesting. So metal detector in a hotel is okay.
certified by SOMET because it's grama and etc. It's exactly. And it's worth visiting. It's sort of like if you know the James Bond movies, when James Bond goes to Q's laboratory, where they have all these people testing these neat devices. So the SOMET laboratory looks like that, except they're all rabbis. You see, it's really cool. You see this big open warehouse, and every corner there's appliances and computers with wires all over the place, and lots of men in long beards peering over sparks flying, making these Shabbat compliant devices and technology. So it's cool. It's a cool place to visit. So that they certify synagogue sound systems like that in that way. So that's electricity. That's makna patish. That's muktzah. Carrying. What's about carrying? Can we say something we can deal with carrying in 6 minutes? Sure, why not? I think so. Let's try. You'd already said, okay. You know what? That's actually not, because I think carrying it's complicated enough. We'll start with it next time. We'll finish it, and then we'll move on to some of the other topics. But we'll pause here for now, okay? And let's find the next time to meet. Okay, next Tuesday I'm not here. The Tuesday after that is the 19th of January. That should be fine. 8 o'clock again, is that okay? Okay. Great. Okay, have a great, I'll have the class again in 2 weeks. I hope to see you before then. Have a great night. See you soon. All right.